When it was revealed that £100 million was being spent on a tunnel to protect bats from high-speed trains, there was outrage, including from the Prime Minister. But after promising to get Britain building and tear down the obstacles to infrastructure, it appears the Prime Minister may have run out of answers on the bat tunnel. Well, let's get more on this with the Wildlife TV presenter and conservationist Chris Packham, and more to get to with Chris in just a moment about how much we spend outside and in nature. But Chris, first your view on this bat tunnel and the reporting there from Sam that it is almost certainly going to go ahead. Is it something that divides opinion equally, or can you see the argument about how people are sort of frustrated how much it's going to cost for circa 300 bats?
I think it's unfortunate that the Prime Minister was picked on this particular piece of infrastructure. HS2 is billions over budget, is riven with corruption. And if the money had been more wisely spent on essential public transport needs, upgrading the railway, then none of this conflict would have happened in the first place. HS2 has run roughshod through, dozens of ancient woodlands and nature reserves. Environmentally, it's been controversial from the start, and it won't be carbon neutral for at least 100 years. I mean, it's a moribund white elephant dying in the UK countryside that it's set to destroy. So bad choice, actually, to pick on this bat tunnel. Most important within Sam's report is the fact that the UK is still essentially a signatory to some of the best wildlife and nature protection laws that were drafted under UK legislation, and we've sought to keep those on post-Brexit. As Becky said there, we live in one of the most nature-depleted parts of the world. Our set of nations is, 200th in the list of those nations. We are a nation of animal lovers, but we've done pretty badly when it comes to looking after the animals in our own backyard. So we're not going to allow those laws to be downgraded without not the fight of our lives, but the fight for our lives. And that's what this is really about, isn't it? Because a sustainable, functional ecosystem is essential for human life on Earth and everything else on Earth. All the food that we grow that comes from those soils will only come from those soils if nature's working and we're working with nature. And that means we have to make compromises when it comes to these sorts of projects.
Well, I guess that's exactly what the counter-argument would say is the need for compromise. Maybe these laws are fantastic and should stay in large part, and I have no doubt that you're right that our nature is depleted and could do with as much protection as possible. But surely the argument for compromise here, for a national infrastructure project that, like it or not, is going ahead, is going to connect millions of people, is costing billions of pounds, that there should be compromise when all we're looking at here is not... Ideally, we wouldn't want to repeal the entire laws, but perhaps that will be necessary. But we're talking about 300 bats. Should there be some flexibility and compromise in the opposite direction?
Well, I don't think we can say it's only 300 bats, because where do we then draw the line? Here's a simple question for you. How many Tudor villages is HS2 ploughing through? How many Georgian towns is it ploughing through? I mean, when it comes to looking after our own, national treasures, things that we've created, we've done everything we can to minimise the damage. What's happened when we have infrastructure projects like this is that nature gets pushed to one side. And that's why we have to fight tooth and nail for it, even when it's costing us £100 million, because we need that nature. We have regulations in place. And again, I draw your attention to the fact that as a percentage of the spending, what is 100 million when it comes to this infrastructure project, which has already been downgraded? It's not meeting all of its targets. It's not going to be heading as far north in the way that it was set out to do in the first place. As I said, it's a grotesque example of public misspent money, and it should have been invested in a better rail system, serving better people better, so that they can travel more efficiently, more cheaply, and with functional internet, rather than getting involved in this great big building project, which is a carbon scar on our efforts to reach net zero. It's very difficult, and I appreciate that many people are going to do the maths and they're going to say, how much is that per bat? Well, how much is it per our future? That's what it comes down to. And I think that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor have been reckless with their language when it comes to constantly bullying bats and newts and using them as some sort of totemic, beating bull. And really, they've lost friends that they had. There's a lot of great ministers in our government. There's a lot of people working there at the moment who know what they've got to do when it comes to net zero, know what they've got to do when it comes to looking after nature. But unfortunately, top down, their jobs are not being made easy by this idea that we've got to build for growth, as if there's an infinite supply of resources, which there isn't. If we want growth, we should be investing it in renewables and building jobs for people and secure future people, for our economy in a sustainable way. This isn't sustainable.
I guess the final point on this, Chris, I just suggest or ask is whether letting perfect be the enemy of the good, that somewhere down the line, all of these laws might get repealed in a much more profound way than you would want to see because of the lack of individual bits of flexibility. And again, I guess along with that, trying to make sure you do bring the populace along with the strength of your arguments rather than be brought down by individual kind of statistics and aspects like this.
Yeah, I think you make a very good point there. And that point is that it is incidences like this which might drag the whole nature conservation and net zero. Let's just use net zero as an all-encompassing, means of describing our need to reduce our carbon output, if you like. If that gets dragged into a culture war and we see this happening all the time, then that divisive, nature versus no nature, carbon versus not the need to deal with it, is the last thing that we need. So I suppose we, as conservationists and environmentalists, are caught between a rock and a hard place here. We will be forced into obviously trying to uphold that legislation that's in place, so therefore we will be litigating. But at the same time, it's really important for people like myself and the ENGOs, the Wildlife Trust, RSPB, Woodland Trust, and all of the others to make sure that we are leading here to communicate to people the need to protect our nature. So I think we, as you say, have got to step up our game and make sure that we can provide adequate explanations as to why the country is spending £100 million on a bat tunnel, on a piece of railway that it probably shouldn't have ever started because it's costing us too much money and it's an environmental disaster.